This week on Words and Numbers, air conditioning.
Disclosure Day.
2 foolishnesses of the week to make up for my absence last week.
And thoughts on birthright citizenship.
All this and more coming up next on Words and Numbers.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, this is where you say your disclaimer.
Oh, quite right. Yes. The opinions expressed here are mine and do not reflect on my employer.
Your employer is thankful for that. Anyway, what's new and exciting in your world this week, Antony?
Well, I was all excited to see this movie, Disclosure Day. Have you seen it?
I have been excited to see that too, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, well, save your money. I didn't realize going in that this was a Spielberg film. And I don't have anything against Spielberg, but Spielberg seems to have gotten into a rut over the past 5 or 6 movies of it's just the same thing over and over again. So here we have, and I won't, spoil anything here. Of course, there isn't much to spoil. If you know it's a Steven Spielberg movie, you know how the thing goes. Disclosure Day, aliens make themselves known. The movie started out quite good, I thought. There were all sorts of serious theological, philosophical, political, economic, technological questions that they could have dived into and made this just an absolutely superb, hands-down movie that will be talked about for generations. Yeah, not so much. They skipped all that stuff. In fact, I asked ChatGPT, and it said roughly 25% of the movie was car chases.
That sounds like a great movie.
What makes me so mad about this is, all right, if you're going to make a movie like that, fine, you make a movie like that. I don't care one way or the other. But to take this topic that opened up doors to all of those serious things that we could have explored and to blow it like you did, it poisons the well for anyone who might come thereafter and want to try a similar thing.
Well, I mean, look, your problem here, to the extent that you have a problem, is that you expect seriousness from Hollywood.
Hollywood has produced serious stuff in the past. It's not that hard, particularly when you've got a name like Spielberg and the ability to draw the budget that a name like that would bring.
It's not that hard, but when you draw the budget that a name like that would bring, you have to recoup your losses, and you have to appeal to, if not the lowest common denominator, the second lowest common denominator. And you know how it goes. And look, I'm going to say something here that will likely engender some disagreement from the wankers out there who listen. But yeah, I'm a big kind of movie guy, and I love the movies, and I'll still watch this one, even with your negative review. I probably won't pay money to do it, but Project Hail Mary fit all of your descriptions.
I just wrote that down. That's a beautiful example of a movie that captured all of that interesting stuff. Now, I think Disclosure Day had an opportunity to hit even more things than Hail Mary did, but Hail Mary is a good example of Hollywood getting it right.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, the vast majority of movies, every time I decide that I want just the simple experience of going to the movies, the movie being irrelevant, right? I wake up and I think, today I would like to go see a movie. I look at the movie listings, and the vast majority of everything I see is a remake, a reboot, or part of a series, right? There is very little by way of interesting, original screenplay. And when I look at the original things, 90% of them are obviously garbage. And it leaves very little choice for a man who wants to watch not only a movie, but, maybe a good one.
Yeah.
And so it goes. I don't want to see, what are those movies about people who drive cars very quickly? They had like the guy died.
Oh, you mean like Ford versus Ferrari, those films?
No, you idiot. The actor died.
I don't know what
And
you're talking about.
like they made 7 of these damn things, and they're probably going to make another 100 of them. Every 2 years, we're going to be subjected to another one of these god-awful things. And the entire plot of the movie is these cars go fast. I mean,
Right.
kind of count me out. Ford versus Ferrari, on the other hand, was a great movie.
That actually was a decent film. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I lied before, Ant, when I said I had 2 foolishnesses of the week to make up for being indisposed, as you so eloquently put it last week. Indisposed is nice because I have not yet gotten any "Is James dead?" emails, which always baffles me a little bit, because why would they email me to ask me if I am dead?
No, because as we speak, that episode hasn't aired. I don't think.
all right.
Oh, maybe it did. Maybe it did air yesterday. It was a
No,
July
it's today.
4th episode.
But it would
What
come
is
out
today? Today's Thursday. It aired this morning. Yeah.
It's nice how excited you get with these little tiny coincidences in the world. But so I lied. I don't have 2 foolishnesses of the week. I have 3 foolishnesses of the week to make up for my absence last week, which I will not even go into, save to say it was horrific on a gastrointestinal.
All right, that's
basis.
enough. Nobody needs
No,
to hear any of
that is enough. That's all I'm going to say. It was as if I went down for a big party in Venezuela and came back and paid the price for drinking the water. Anyway, the first of the 3, and the second 2 are related, so this one, by definition, sticks out like a sore thumb and came out today. So it's going to be everything we cover is going to be a week behind by the time it airs. But Mayor Kami Mamdani in New York City, that's what I'm calling him for the rest of all time, today came out and said, or maybe it was last night, it's hot out there, and the power grid is working overtime to keep us cool. Set your AC to 78 degrees. Turn off lights, electronics you're not using, and unplug what you can. And I want to know, Ant, what you think the odds are that this absolute sucker has his air conditioning set at 78 degrees.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's the way it is.
0%.
Yeah.
0%.
The politicians have to have, they have to fly private. They have to have the air conditioning because they need all that to govern the rest of us.
That's right. How can the great unwashed be told what to do if those in power aren't experiencing comfort of every kind?
Well, did you see this thing in Europe? That actually was the thing. Some woman, part of the EU government, gets on there saying the same thing, that we're going to have brownouts and blah, 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 and no air conditioning. Meanwhile, she's giving this talk on the television from an air-conditioned office.
Of course she is, because we can't have our leaders sweating like little piglets when they go on to proclaim their pronouncements to the rest of us. And I will point out, and I wanted to talk about this and then ultimately decided not to as part of this brief segment, that the death rates per 100,000 because of heat are extraordinarily high. Where? Western Europe.
Yes.
I mean, and somehow in the last 2 weeks, the very existence of air conditioning has become, for some reason, a right-wing agenda problem. And for the life of me, I can't figure any of this nonsense out. But air conditioning is one of the greatest things ever invented. I mean, Willis Carrier, who invented air conditioning more than 100 years ago, should be sainted. The things that he allows us to do 100 years out, using functionally the exact same technology, is astonishing. The only downside to air conditioning is that it allows Congress to meet year-round. Washington was once a disgusting, fetid swamp, and you may say that in some ways it still is. But it was a
Now it's
literal,
only metaphorical.
that's right. It was a literal, fetid, disgusting swamp that reached, extraordinarily high temperatures with extraordinarily high humidity, which is why Congress adjourned for the summer. And now they don't. So for every plus, there is a corresponding minus. Unintended consequences. What can you do? But even knowing this unintended consequence, I would pay it every time.
And the weird thing about Western Europe is, I know Germany's moved away from this, but I believe it's still the case in France that the vast majority, and by vast majority, I mean like 80% plus of their electricity is nuclear. So it's not like you can say, well, you shouldn't run your air conditioning because it's contributing to global warming.
Yeah. Meanwhile, China almost single-handedly accounts for all the carbon emissions in the world.
Right, yeah.
Almost single-handedly. It's by a factor of like 20 or 30 over the European countries. So when European politicians say, well, that heat has to go somewhere when it's sucked out of your house by the air conditioning, and people don't realize this, but air conditioning, as it works, doesn't cool your air, it removes heat.
Right,
and
it just sticks it outside.
It just puts the heat outside. So, look, there's going to be some effect, but it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Comparatively speaking, it's nothing. And when people are dying from heat and you don't allow them to put air conditioning in, I found out that there is so much red tape in putting an air conditioner into a home in Great Britain that most people give up halfway through the process.
Never occurred to me there's red tape. I mean, here you just go out to Lowe's and you buy an air conditioner and stick it in your window and you're done. You got right, and you have to go through hoops in UK.
And this is the kind of thing that the World Cup soccer fans are realizing about the United States once they get here. There's all kinds of things you can just do and have and enjoy that back home you can't. And turns out air conditioning is one. And part of the red tape is that you need a doctor's note explaining why you need air conditioning medically.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, not moving to England. Oh, and there's also a non-zero chance that if you get through all the hoops and then pay for the expense of putting in a split unit, which requires a big hole be cut into your wall and the whole bit, the government will change its mind and come and make you take it out. I call bullshit on the English government here.
Now, this sounds ridiculous, but it's enough of a step that it's a much smaller step to, okay, you're going to have to get a doctor's note to have heat or to turn your heat above 65 or whatever it is.
Well, they banned free speech quickly enough without any doctor's notes, so I think that their government thinks it can do anything it wants. And we'll see, sooner or later, the English people are going to get sick and tired of this. And by this, I mean all of this. And I think England is about near a tipping point, but we'll keep an eye on it. And, we don't usually talk about foreign things, but we'll keep an eye on it and get back to it if and when it becomes relevant. This brings us, Antony, to the second foolishness of the week. You might recall when you and I discussed DJT stock in the past. And I say the Donald J. Trump Corporation. Mm-hmm. And I said it was at 100. And I said, this is going to zero before you know it. And then it got down to like 12 and it bounced back up to 30. And being the truth-telling sort that I am, I came on and I said, I can't really quite believe this, but it's up to 30 or whatever it was. And I thought, hey, wait a minute. I haven't even looked at this for a long, long time. Where's it at now? And at this very second, it is up 6.8% today. to $8.54.
Yep.
So it is, in fact, on its way to zero.
Yeah, sure.
No doubt about it.
However, I thought you were going to mention his $1 billion profit on his cryptocurrency.
Which brings us to the third foolishness of the week. That's right. It's almost as if you can look into my eyes and read my brain. Yes, I am. Because Trump has made such a point of the fact that he's not taking a salary that we're all supposed to believe that he's doing things out of the goodness of his cold black heart. But no, not so much, because he's made, near as I can tell from the articles I've read, and estimates vary, but the reasonable estimates cluster around about $1.4 billion. And there have been two different coins that he's released. One was a Trump coin of some kind, and then there's the World Liberty Financial business that he did sometime thereafter.
And you said at the time that he released these, that the only person who's going to make money off of this is Donald Trump.
That's right. And at this moment in time, he's almost the only one who's above water on any of this stuff. And the other people who are above water are people in his family.
Right.
Because, of course, they all knew to get in on it on day one.
So,
of course they did.
There are laws against profiting because of your political position.
Yeah, apparently it doesn't matter. He said recently that, sometime along the way, I realized that nobody cared.
Well,
said it out loud. Said it out loud.
They don't now, but I bet you when he's out of office, the rest of his life is going to be nonstop fighting criminal and civil lawsuits.
No, it won't, because he's going to pardon himself on his last day in office.
Well, that's good. That's going to be fascinating. That's going to be very interesting.
Remember, a pardon only covers federal law. So if there are state laws anywhere that ban this sort of thing, and those transactions occurred in those states, and given that they're electronic in nature, some of those transactions are going to flow through those states. People are going to become very clever.
So he might actually have a worse problem. He may just have magnified the number of lawsuits by 50.
Perhaps, and there might even be international problems. I mean, who knows? I'll tell you a quick story. I usually save the stories for the end, but this one matters at this point in the conversation. When I lived in Iraq, I was paid in American dollars, and somehow had to get the American dollars back home so my wife could pay the mortgage.
And when you say paid in American dollars, you mean actual physical dollars?
I was paid in sequential $100 bills directly from the U.S. Mint. I felt like a drug dealer. And
if you tried to bring them into this country, you'd be treated like one.
Well, that's right. I couldn't just... You have a $10,000 cap on what you can bring. And if you put $10,000 in your pocket to bring home, and they find a quarter in your bag, they confiscate all of it. So, you're playing with fire. Now, we would all bring home $8,000 when we could, but you can't come home often enough to bring a year's salary home. I came home once in the time I was there. You have other people mule it for you. You say, can you take this $4,000? And when you get home, write my wife a check and send it to her. And so there was all kinds of this sort of thing going on. But at some point, Western Union stopped sending dollars out of Iraq. I don't know whether it was a government policy or a Western Union policy. All I knew is that I couldn't. And I never trusted the Iraqi banks because the Iraqi bank offered to wire money anywhere you wanted. But I didn't trust them as far as I could throw a school bus. So I never did that. A friend of mine, on the other hand, did. And you have no control over how the money is routed. It just goes from one place to another along whatever nodes happen to be open. And his money crossed through Iran before it made it to the United States. And all of a sudden, the FBI was at his house.
Yeah.
And they shut down every single account that he had. And his family wasn't going to be able to make the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They had rent to pay. They had bills. And then his accounts were shut down for like 3 months before it got sorted out. They said, oh, okay, all we need, we see what this is. All we need is a notarized letter. He said, I live in Iraq. Where do you think I'm going to find a notary? And they told him, oh, in the green zone in Baghdad. He said, I'm not going to Baghdad. What the hell's wrong with you? I'll get shot 3 miles away from the green zone, and that'll be that. And they said, well, that's all we can do. So, when you start getting involved with laws that digitally cross state lines, you end up in a real gray area. And there's going to be a lot of people, even if Trump pardons himself, and even if the Supreme Court upholds that a president can do such a thing, which I'm not sure. I am sure that will make it to the Supreme Court, and I'm not sure they will uphold it, because a pardoning power is designed for the purposes of tending after injustices. Right? When you know that an injustice has occurred, you can make it right. It's not so you can break the law for years and years and years and then play your get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very open question whether the Supreme Court would go along with a self-pardon. There are good reasons that they would. And there are good reasons that they wouldn't. It's not a slam dunk either way. So we all wait and see. But as of right now, Donald Trump himself has made more than $1 billion on these trash coins that were literally designed so all the people who bought them would lose their money. They would just lose their money to the Trump family.
And to someone who says in response, well, okay, but he's not drawing a salary, I believe the salary of the U.S. president is around $500,000.
No, I don't even think it's that high.
Well, but I was in high school, it was like 400.
Even if it were that high, that is a literal drop in this bucket.
Oh, yeah. Well, $500,000 for 4 years, that's $2 million.
$2 million versus over $100 billion.
Yeah, you're like fractions of a percent. Yeah,
that's right. It's utterly meaningless. So you can see that we obviously have problems with presidential authority in some respects, with coin markets in some respects, right? There are a number of different cross-cutting currents here, and we're going to have to sort them all out sooner or later. So, as I said not more than 5 minutes ago, we'll keep an eye on that for you too, and we'll get back to you when some interesting things happen. But Ant, you wanted to talk about something today, and like an idiot, I agreed. So here we are.
I wondered, well, as we speak, the Birthright decision came down just about 48 hours ago from the Supreme Court. And I've been noticing something. I wanted your take on it because, I mean, you're an expert in these matters. But what I've been noticing is people on the right excoriating the Supreme Court decision, using the same sorts of language and arguments I've seen people on the left use against the Second Amendment. And so I wanted to dig into this to find out what's going on. And here's, for background, the Birthright Citizenship decision boils down to, if you are born in this country, you are a citizen, regardless of whether your parents were here legally, illegally, doesn't matter. And this is one of these instances, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree. In fact, I have lots of questions about that. I shouldn't say that outcome. I have questions about that, whether someone should be a citizen by virtue of birth, but that's a completely separate point. The point I want to discuss is, what does the Constitution say? So here I've got the 14th Amendment, and there's only one sentence here that relates to this. It is.
Actually, there are two, I think, and I'm pretty sure I know which the first one you're going to read is, so go ahead.
Okay, so the one I've got is, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside.
Yep, that's exactly where you should begin. It's the very first line of the 14th Amendment. And as a constitutional amendment, it carries the force of the Constitution. So when we look at the amendment, we have to look at it in the same way that we look at the fact that the president must be at least 35 years old. Right? It's non-negotiable. The president must be 35 years old. And there's all kinds of other things we can point to, but you take the point. It's simple enough. So when it says all persons, what does it mean? It means all persons, but then there's a qualifier. Born or naturalized in the United States. Okay.
Now,
so
the one we care about right now is the born part.
Born, because naturalized, well, that already makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want to start denaturalizing citizens, we're going to be right back here.
Right.
Right. But all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and then this is a difficult part that people were hanging their hat on, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And this is actually way simpler than people want it to be. People say that if you're an illegal, or here illegally, however you want to state that you're breaking the law. And yes,
that doesn't mean
true.
that you're not subject to the jurisdiction.
That's absolutely correct. You are in fact breaking the law, but you're still subject to it. And if you get caught, you're going to be punished. That's what subject to the law means. But there are some people, there is a very small class of people who are not subject to the law of the United States. And
yes,
it's generally diplomats from other countries.
And that's what diplomatic immunity is.
That's right.
You are not subject to.
That's right. And you might be able to, and look, I have never specialized nor particularly cared about Indian law until I moved out west, and I'm abutting several Indian reservations. It's interesting now to me at a much later period in my life than it was when I was studying constitutional law as a graduate student. So I'm not exactly sure how deeply federal law can reach into a reservation. I know there's a limit of some kind. I don't have any idea where that limit is. I know the limit is far more stringent for state governments to interfere on Indian land. That's why we can have Indian casinos in states where you do not have any other kind of casino.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because the state can't regulate Indian land. I don't know where the federal line is. It's not that I don't care, because I kind of do now, but I've just not looked into it enough to say anything intelligent about it. So does subject to the jurisdiction cover Indian tribes? I'm not exactly sure, but it's not really relevant to our discussion today.
Right.
I just wanted to point out my ignorance on that particular matter, because people often come back at us for things that we didn't cover. And I'm just stipulating up front that we're not covering this because I can't, not because we don't want to. And then you get our citizens of the United States, which is what the important part is here today. But it's the second part, and of the state wherein they reside, that mattered the most in 1868 when this amendment was ratified. Because what ended up happening after the 13th Amendment was passed, abolishing slavery, was, okay, slaves were no longer slaves. Were they citizens? And you could imagine a number of states answering that in the negative. So, in across the South, they didn't have voting rights. They didn't have the rights of citizenry. They couldn't appeal to the same legal institutions that their white counterparts could, even though they were no longer slaves. And that causes a real problem. But I want you to take another look at that sentence and notice a word that's not used. Can you pick up on it? This is what a lot of people don't really think about.
Are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No, I'm not following you.
There is no permutation of the word slavery there.
Right, yes.
So when you hear the argument that the 14th Amendment was written, and this is true, it was, when you hear that it was written to grant freed slaves political rights, that never appears in the text of the document.
Right. The text doesn't say anything about that. But here we land on an argument that I hear people on the right making. Oh, this is about slavery, which is in the same spirit as the argument people on the left make that, well, the Second Amendment was really about a militia, or it was really about muskets.
Or only covers
when
muskets,
the
right.
Plain words on the paper tell you what it's about. So too here.
And look, I'll address the Second Amendment for a moment. The Second Amendment could not foresee, and this is obviously true of every other word in the Constitution, but the Second Amendment could not foresee the rise of nuclear weapons. Are they covered? Do you think the Second Amendment covers nuclear weapons? Can I own a tactical nuke?
Well, I mean, we've decided that it doesn't.
Yeah, we've decided that it doesn't, but I'm asking you.
Oh, well, I would say that there is a qualitative difference between a tactical nuke and anything up to and including, for example, a tank. And that
I don't understand, right? Because there's only two answers here, as you initially presented it. There are muskets, and then there's everything from musket up to nuclear weapon.
See, but the difference between, you cross a line when you get to things like nuclear weapon, and that is that the thing will kill indiscriminately. That you can't say, I'm going to kill this guy and not that guy. Now, all of a sudden, you open the door to infringing on other people's rights, which is not what the Second Amendment is about.
But you can kill indiscriminately with any weapon, including a kitchen knife.
But you don't have to. In other words, you have to choose to kill indiscriminately with those other things. With the nuke, it just happens.
And you see what's happening here, right? We are kind of picking around the edges at a couple of different things here. We're looking at the text of the Constitution on the one hand. Then we're looking at the original intent of whoever wrote it. Then we're looking at the original intent of whoever ratified it. Then we're looking at the logic of it given certain modern day situations. Right? There's a laundry list that kind of emerges. And I would say the very first thing, and I'm going to out myself, right? There are multiple ways to interpret the Constitution. There are textualists. Antony Scalia, the great conservative justice, is the best example of a textualist we ever had.
And a textualist means he just reads what's on the paper.
You read the words in the statute or in the Constitution. And a story I've told you in the past, but I've never told here. There was a law in the books somewhere that said if you use a gun in the commission of a crime, you get these heightened levels of punishment. And some dim bulb somewhere decided he would trade a handgun for a busload of drugs. And they got caught. And the police charged him with using a handgun in the commission of a crime. Now, that is very clearly not the original intent. The original intent was if you point a gun at someone, if you shoot at someone, hell, even if you shoot into the air, if you walk into a convenience store and say, everybody down on the floor and wave a gun around, you're using a gun in the commission of a crime. Trading a gun for drugs is not the same animal. And Scalia said, you know what? The law says using a gun in the commission of the crime, which is exactly what this man did. Case closed.
Right.
He said, it's not up to me to divine what a state legislature was thinking when they passed the law. And if they wanted it to read a different way, they would have passed a different law. Now, I fall into that camp as long as that method gives you a very clear answer to the problem before you. If it becomes murky, then I move to originalism, right? What did the people who wrote what I'm looking at think about it? What did the people who ratified an amendment? So in the case of a state law, I'm going to look and see what the state legislature really was thinking, because there's debates. You can go read them, right? People wrote op-eds. You can go read those. You can know what people were thinking. Can you know it to a 100% degree of certainty? No. But if you asked me a question about the Declaration of Independence and said simply, what did Jefferson think about this? I could have an answer for you probably within the hour, if not right off the top of my head.
Well, and, for example, with the 14th Amendment, although, as you pointed out, it doesn't say anything about slavery, we know that is what prompted this.
Yeah, but my point is a larger one. Yes, that's what prompted it, but they chose to write it without using that word.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating. They wrote this to apply to the entire human family. If you're born here, you're a citizen. Period. Hard stop. At the end of the 14th Amendment, there's a second very important sentence. It's in Section 5. The Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So that means Congress gets to decide how it plays out. But if we take that first sentence as defining the constitutional answer, right, that this is now what the Constitution says, when you get to Section 5, Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions in this article. Doesn't mean it can redefine the provisions of this article. It just means we can now say to states in the South, you still haven't made them citizens. But it also means that Congress can say, these people kind of came up from Mexico and had children in the United States, and somehow they're not being treated as citizens. We do hereby declare and decide that they are going to be treated as citizens. Period. That's what Congress can do. Congress can work in the affirmative case, but not in the negative case. And once it goes to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court upholds the way we've been reading this, well, now that's the answer, and there's nothing Congress can do about it, and there's nothing the president can do about it. This is the new answer until a constitutional amendment occurs, which I would admit is unlikely but possible, especially on this topic. The American people, I think, while not up to the level it would have to be to get it through, are sufficiently irritated by birth tourism that they might well make a constitutional amendment and see it through. It's either got to be that or another Supreme Court decision. These are the only ways that we're going to switch course now.
So reasonable people who have argued against me on this have gone back to the point that you put aside and said, okay, yes, it says all persons, but the fact is the intent was to deal with slavery. There's no question that that was the intent.
Well, hang on. If that was the intent and the only intent, then why doesn't it say former slaves and their offspring?
Granted, but my question is, what are some of the pitfalls of taking the other position and saying, okay, yeah, you're right, this really does mean slavery, despite what it says, given the intent?
And you already know, and this is what ends up with the irony of this decision is that three of the most conservative justices, I would dare say the three most conservative justices, came down on the other side of this one, with a fourth agreeing in part and disagreeing in part. So this wasn't the 9-0 decision it should have been. And it, in my mind, it's so obvious a 9-0 decision. My opinion, were I on the court, would have been 2 sentences long, right? I would have quoted that first sentence that you started us with, and then I would have said, see, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States. The end, right? It's that simple for me. But you get this kind of irony when the conservatives will overlook the plain text of the Constitution to go hunting for deeper esoteric meanings that will allow them to decide it how they want, not how the Constitution speaks. They become literally no better than the crackpots who sat on the court during the New Deal era, who decided that the Commerce Clause meant that you can't grow wheat on your own farm to feed your own cattle. The case Wickard v. Filburn that you and I talk about all the time, that is so obviously and blatantly a constitutional violation that every one of those justices should have been taken out back and shot for having decided it that way. And you have to be better than that. The minute you all agree that politicizing Supreme Court decisions is not only possible, but acceptable, and not only acceptable, but a good and powerful thing to do, then the Constitution, once again, has less meaning today than it did yesterday.
But I hear you. I don't think we've hit well the counter-argument that says, but look, we understand what the people were thinking when they wrote this, regardless of what it says. And my point is, I think there's a big pitfall there, and it begins with the assumption that everyone who signed on to this had the same intent. You talk about the intent of the writers. There was no intent of the writers. There was a bunch of people who got together, and some of them wrote the thing, most of them voted for or against the thing, but they were looking at the words. And there were some people who would have interpreted the words to mean one thing, some to interpret to mean something else, some who looked at it as all right, I don't like the idea, but I can live with it given the specific wording that's here. And all we're left with today are the words. To do anything more than that is to cherry pick.
Yeah, but there's when you get to the 15th Amendment and political rights are extended to the same group without mentioning the same group, does that mean that they're not also, by definition, extended to Vietnamese people who moved to the United States?
I don't know what the 15th Amendment says.
Well, the 14th Amendment guarantees civil rights to freed slaves. But in the process of granting said rights, they granted those same rights to every other single person in the United States.
Right.
And then the 15th Amendment comes along, because the 14th Amendment didn't go far enough. The 15th Amendment comes along and grants political rights to the same group of people in the same way that we're talking about this. Slavery is not mentioned, former slave not mentioned. This is just the new rule. And it's obvious that it became an issue because of slavery, But the answer to the issue that came about because of slavery is written in broad universal human terms. And you're right when you say people would have disagreed at the time that the 14th and even the 15th Amendment, and indeed every amendment, was passed. They had different reasons that they voted yes or no. And two people who voted yes might have voted for completely different and even reasons that were mutually exclusive.
Sure.
Right? All that kind of shit happens when you're dealing with a constitutional amendment for a country as big as the United States, even as big as it was in the 1860s. So all you have at the end of the process is the document. Now, if the document is silent on a matter or ambiguous, then and only then, as I said earlier, is it appropriate to go to the historical record and start digging around.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, that first sentence is so clear that we have no need for that.
Yeah, and so we go to this word you used, ambiguous. There is nothing ambiguous about the words on the page. Now, you can bring in other things, other considerations, and create ambiguity.
Well, then that should have
That's
been
not
done
the
in
question. The
1860.
question is, what does it say? There's no
That's right.
ambiguity in the words on the page.
None whatsoever. And the people who wrote in dissent went out and manufactured some ambiguity. They cited a previous case that decided this way, and you know what was really meant, as the argument you've put forward 5 or 6 times now. But the words on the page, to me, read exactly as clearly as the president must be 35 years of age. That doesn't mean that if you're 34 and 350 days old, good enough. You must be 35. That's what it says. And I can make a really nice argument that 35 in 1787, when the Constitution was written, was a much higher bar than it is now.
Well, let's run with that for a moment, because someone who wants to invoke intent could say, well, at the time it was written, only men could be president, so really the age limit only applies to male presidents.
And you're going to find this very hard to believe. The Constitution does not specify that the president must be male.
No, but at the time that it was written, women weren't given the vote. Women weren't allowed, I should say weren't allowed to vote. We did not recognize women's right to vote.
You will be surprised to learn that that is not true either. That
Oh, really?
women could in fact vote in New Jersey at the time. And then later on, New Jersey decided that women could no longer vote, and a bunch of women voted that they shouldn't be voting.
You're kidding me, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the vote was largely seen at the time of the founding as a vote for the family's interest.
Mm-hmm.
And that the man, as head of household, knew the family interest from every angle. Look, I get, how you're going to make the case that this ain't exactly right. But the words are clear.
Right.
The words are just clear. And if you want to make them unclear, and remember Wickard v. Filburn, the way they made the words unclear there was that Congress can regulate interstate commerce. But this one dude was growing wheat on his own farm, and his own farm existed in one state. And he wasn't selling any of his produce that he was holding back for his cows to people in other states, nor was he selling it to people next door. Not that that would matter, given...
Yeah, there was neither commerce nor interstate here.
Yeah, that's right, neither one. And yet the Supreme Court decided that by not buying the wheat he would need for his cows on the open market, interstate commerce was affected. And the prices of grains would go up and down if people were allowed to just grow their own. So in one fell swoop, the Congress utterly violates, or the Supreme Court utterly violates property rights, right? I mean, this man has property right to do whatever the hell he wants. It's on his own property. And then they rewrite the Interstate Commerce Clause to mean something that is neither interstate nor commerce. And then the whole federal government walks right through that opening,
right,
and we get the gigantic state that we now have.
And in the end, I'm sad to say I'm seeing lots of people on the left doing what we decry those on the right who do also, which is to confuse their dislike of the answer with a dislike of the process.
Yeah,
and look, this is, I'm not sure I like the answer, but I absolutely claim it's the right one.
I agree fully, and I'm probably happier with the answer than you are, but even I have my reservations. But I'll tell you, when I was teaching constitutional law, the very first day of class, I would walk in and I would say, look, we are going to take the Constitution very seriously here. We're going to read it word by word. We're going to examine these cases. We're going to take it all very seriously. More seriously, in fact, than most people who have sworn an oath to uphold it.
Mm-hmm.
More seriously, in fact, than I would guess probably a majority of the Supreme Court justices take it. And I want you to remember two separate things that might be the same thing, but I view them separately. You may have a terrible thing that is perfectly constitutional, and you may have a wonderful thing that is absolutely unconstitutional. And if you don't leave those two things out in front of you when you're deciding how something should be decided, you will come up wanting for the correct decision often. Maybe not always, maybe not even a majority of the time, but often. If we don't have a constitution, Ant, it's the law of the jungle. It's
right,
the law of the strongest. If we do have a constitution, then we've gotten, for one of the first times in human history, past that problem. And for a long time, we broke the wrong way on constitutional issues over and over and over and over. And it's a danger. Even if you like the answer, it's a danger. This goes the right way, constitutionally. Now, if you're still in a lather about it, I would absolutely encourage you to try to get a constitutional amendment to reverse it. Because that's the mechanism by which we do these things. And every time Congress goes too far and passes an unconstitutional law, and every time the Supreme Court just lets it happen, we're diminished. But when we admit, no, the Constitution means this, and we're aware that many of us here, maybe even a majority, and I think it might be a majority in the United States right now, who don't like birthright citizenship. Well, is it enough that we can get an amendment through? And the amendment process was purposely made difficult. Purposely. So that a hot button issue wouldn't get through. So is this the thing that we all care about right now? Or is this a thing that we all genuinely care about for the health of the Republic? Because if it's the first thing, all support for an amendment will peter out long before the process has gone to its logical conclusion. If it's the second thing, it will go to a logical conclusion. A yes or a no. But it will get there if it's a serious thing. Kind of like how the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments got there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These were serious issues that weren't going to go away. And now somebody's going to send hate mail saying that these were rammed down the throats of the southern states who remained unrepresented. Yes, I know. Take my larger point in the spirit in which I offered it. And if you can't do that, Go look at the 26th Amendment. Whatever the last one is. I think it's 26, maybe 27.
Didn't the last one take something like 200 years?
Yeah, it was
to
the
pass?
last one. The last one was interesting because it was written by James Madison, and it was
It just passed like within the past couple decades.
a couple decades. Yeah, and it concerned the way in which congressmen can raise their salaries. Right, so it's no great shakes, but it's not unimportant either. And people started to realize along the way that if these proposed amendments linger out there for 1,000 years, sooner or later they'll all pass. Right? Sooner or later, something crazy is going to happen. And that's why sunset provisions are written into them now, that this will either pass or not pass within 20 years, something like this. And this is why something like, or this is it's not why, but it's the mechanism by which the Equal Rights Amendment went out of everybody's brain. Right? That was all the rage when you and I were boys. Right? We're going to have an Equal Rights Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't get it done in the correct number of years, in the specified number of years. So we didn't get it. And I think you could make the case that, and people did make the case at the time, most famously Phyllis Schlafly, Anita Bryant, that this was going to make the lot of women worse over time, that we're all better off if we don't have this. And we didn't get this, and women are better off by virtually every metric.
Mm-hmm.
So, things don't always work out the way people think. The unintended consequences go one way, the intended consequences sometimes go another. But on this one, I mean, you'll notice what we haven't done. We haven't dug into any of the actual opinions by the justices.
Yeah, and I mean that's more
and
than what we have.
I'm not
time.
gonna. Yeah, I'm not gonna.
But I will. Yeah, and I'm with you. But I just wanted to point out I have immense respect for Clarence Thomas, and was really surprised that he landed on the opposite side of this question.
Clarence Thomas is my absolute favorite justice right now. And every now and then, a case comes along and I think, well, Thomas is going to be right on the right side of this one. And he just blows me away by being not only completely wrong, but proudly completely wrong. But, that's how the Supreme Court works. You get the people on the Supreme Court, and then you say, go do your job. And sometimes it's shocking. And Justice Barrett, for example, a Trump appointee. Boy, he must hate her. She decides against him time after time after time. Roberts, too. Right? Mm-hmm. Time after time after time. Do I think those two are crazy? No. Do I think the three that were in full dissent are crazy? Absolutely not. I don't think they should have been in dissent on this one, but I've read other things by them that I thought was brilliant legal constitutional reasoning and should be everybody's understanding of whatever thing it was. And I'm reminded, and maybe we'll end with this. I'm reminded by Eisenhower, referring to his nomination of Earl Warren to the Supreme Court as the biggest damn fool mistake I ever made. and then, a little while later, Earl Warren decides Brown versus Board of Education, and his name is etched into American civil rights history forever. I think for all kinds of lousy reasons, I don't agree with how Brown v. Board was decided. Clark and we keep threatening to have a public debate about this, and we never actually make it happen. But I think someday we will. And it's not that I disagree with the spirit of the decision. I think desegregation was absolutely the correct thing to do. But the way it was done was really sloppy. And really quite in a tawdry sort of way that was beneath the Supreme Court's dignity. And actually beneath the dignity of the people who were desegregated. But that's for another day. This was actually a good one, I think. I had a nice time talking about this.
It was. I'm interested to hear what our listeners have to say about it.
I am
Quite a
too. And
discussion on Backstage.
Yeah, and I read it, and people have been relatively respectful about this one, at least so far. No mud being slung yet, but, it's early in the day, and I haven't really woke up enough to read things yet. So we'll see how things go. But for now, so far, so good. And Ant, I will see you next week when we talk about something, or have a guest maybe, that's even more thrilling than what we did today. This I can assure you. And until then, for the love of Pete, will you people just be nice to each other? Come on, I know it's hot. It's 107 degrees where I am, but I actually wave to people as I see them outside, and I let people who are driving aggressively just go right around me without putting up my middle finger. And I say thank you to people who bring me things. And I say please before they bring me things. These are easy things, people. Do these easy things and watch the miracles happen. And I'll catch you next week. Have a good week.
See you next time, James.